welcome back to another video. This time I am making a ridiculously delicious broccoli cheese soup. My mom was able to help me out at least a little bit with some of the preparation of the stuffs to help make the downtime a lot. So my mom added the butter to the pan and it's on like a medium-low setting. She got off the broccoli for me while I'm dicing up the onion. I like to do a more fine dice, and I know that in the directions it tells you to render down the onions, like saute them in a separate pan. I've made this recipe a few times and I just choose to ignore that part because you can still make your roux properly with the onions and the garlic staying in the pan. It doesn't affect it. Because I've done recipes where it tells you to just make your roux in with the vegetables that you have rendered down a little bit. So that's what I've chosen to do for this recipe. The first few times I did follow the directions exactly as written. So, so yeah, you kind of like, you make it and you learn from it and you make little tiny like tweaks and adjustments and things like that. So, at first, I am measuring out a total of 4 cups of liquid, 2 cups of the chicken or vegetable broth, and 2 cups of milk. Eventually, in the end, I did end up adding the remaining 2 cups of the vegetable broth. I honestly even would be, like, if I'm especially making it for a larger group of people, use 2 things of the vegetable, two big boxes of the vegetable broth. And now Jessie is giving everything a good stir, adding the remaining butter to the onion mixture, we added some garlic to it as well and cooked that down. And this is me adding the flour to the whole onion, garlic, butter mixture, and you just let that sit there and cook. Like, the key when making a roux is you want the smell of raw flour to go away. When it starts smelling more nutty, then you know that your roux the flour has cooked long enough, and then you add cold liquid to your pan. It is very important for it to be cold. It has to do with the chemical makeup of how the flour, each little flour granule is coated in the butter or like the fat, and then you add the cold liquid to it and it just combines together beautifully. And I talked over myself adding the carrots. I added it way before. Like the last time I made it, I added the carrots at the last like 20 minutes and that wasn't long enough. So I added it during the first segment where you're supposed to be, you know, you give it 20-25 minutes to, or like 15 or 20 minutes to simmer. And while the carrots are cooking and simmering in the broth, and it's thickening up because we made a roux, my mom is shredding the cheddar cheese. Yes, it's white. That is what the store had on hand that we went to. And I chopped up the 2 broccoli heads into smaller bite-sized pieces, so that way they weren't like ginormous and you have to open your mouth super big, like as big as you can in order to be able to take a bite. So once the base had simmered for about, I chose 15 minutes because I didn't want it to get rid of too much of the liquid. I didn't want it to thicken up too much. The cheese honestly does most of that thickening work for you. And so now I'm adding the broccoli to it, and after I gave that a good mix so that way the broccoli got coated in the liquid to the best of its ability, I put the lid on to try and trap as much of the moisture in there to try and preserve the amount of liquid that was in the soup. I don't think the directions called for that either. I was naughty and filmed putting the spices together separately. I just added that, gave it a good mix. After adding the spices, I slowly add in the cheddar cheese, which I have also turned the temperature off on the stove at this point, and I'm only using the heat of the soup to melt the cheese. Cheddar cheese, from my experience, has a tendency to melt really grainy, and it doesn't melt into things very well. For some reason with this soup, does a great job. But when I make like a macaroni and cheese type sauce base, it just doesn't ever like to melt very nicely. And I think also there's a difference between like a block of cheddar and the pre-shredded cheddar, so that could make a difference too. But it came out so good. Yum. Okay, so I've made this several times before, but it's really good, so I had to share it.
So
Wow.
they know what it tastes like. But I'm the newcomer. We'll see. Just teasing. Okay. So far you've got a lot. You added the rest of that chicken broth in there, so it's really rich with that chicken broth. Which
No, vegetable broth.
oh, it was vegetable broth. Oh, okay. Pardon me. I wasn't paying attention. Okay, well, I thought I was talking normal, but
No, I'm just letting you know.
yeah, okay. So I like the added richness.
Oh, Lily's not happy with this. That's a lot of cheese. There we go.
Yeah, and it's too bad that they didn't have the proper sharp.
I don't
cheddar.
exist.
Wanna hang out? Do you want me to go with you to the dinner?
That so much better. She walked right by me like I wasn't even there.
Do you want to try?
It's all right, honey. You don't have to.
What did you call it? Yucky?
You should have seen her face when you asked her if she wanted any, man.
You want to sit on Grandma's lap?
Okay, so I'm editing the video right now and learned that apparently like the final say on things didn't get recorded. But the consensus on the cheddar broccoli soup was good. It's a soup, like I said, that I have made several times before. And the only difference this time around, or like the things that I've learned, is add the carrots in sooner, use up that entire box of vegetable broth, and don't use quite as much of the broccoli that I used. And also, the sharper the cheddar, the more flavorful the cheese part's gonna be. So we were at Sprouts, and that was where I decided to try and find some cheese, and I just settled for just white cheddar cheese. If you didn't know, the orange color to cheddar cheese is added to it. So normally it's supposed to be white, which is why it looked weird in the video. But yeah, they didn't have sharp cheddar unless I felt like paying like a hefty price for it. And we can't do that, so I went with their bulk priced one, and it didn't really have a strong flavor in any way, shape, or form, so give or take, but it was still very tasty. The leftovers were great, and I actually wouldn't even be opposed to adding equal parts of like the milk to the vegetable broth, or you can even add like up to 6 cups of the chicken broth, depending on how soupy you want the soup. So you could also add less cheese at the end, just enough to get the cheese flavor, but not have it be like super thick like ours was. And Yuki saying hi. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents on it. I really hope you guys try this recipe if you like a combination of cheese and broccoli. It's really, really good. It's definitely a favorite in our house, and I really hope Lily will someday not be opposed to trying what we eat eventually. So anyway, I'll talk to you guys later. Have fun!